Welcome to Raising Vibrations. You with Simon today, and in today's video we're going to be looking at the full moon in Aquarius, and this is for the 3rd of August 2020. So I hope that every one of you is okay during this period of time. I know that it has been really intense. It has been for the last couple of years, but 2020 has definitely been one of those years where we've met ourselves as a human race in a very profound and, as I said, intense way. So there's a kind of profound symbolism that I deeply connect with and resonate with in this picture. And I hope that in some way, shape or form today, I can transcribe that to you and illuminate something that I feel deeply passionate about and deeply real about within my own personal life, and what I consider to be something meaningful as I translate this full moon in Aquarius. So I'd like you to do a favor and just kind of hold this flame in your awareness as you go through this video and you digest what it is that I'm sharing. And I invite you to do two things when you are going to participate in listening to this transmission. The first is to really find yourself a space where you can dedicate the time that it is to digest this video. And the reason why I'm encouraging this is because I'd like you to fully feel what sensations arise within you as you take in this material. You know, what becomes alive for you, what becomes really real for you, and as I said, to really allow yourself to engage in your senses and what gets stirred up. So I want to start off with a little bit about the image of fire in the consciousness of mankind and the consciousness that is life itself. I think one of the things that's deeply fascinating about the flame and the fire for us as a human race is that it symbolizes something very primal about our evolution, something very primal in the way that we will interact with the flame or the fire itself. And the nature of the symbol speaks deeply to our history, as I talk about the primalness within us, but our history of what has really brought us to this moment in time, where the spark of creation, the spark of divinity within ourselves, the flame which we eternally seek to tend as a way to feel meaning and aliveness within inside of ourselves is deeply encoded in this symbol. And for a very large percentage of those in a place within themselves right now, this flame seems to be absent or very dim. And yet, in its very nature, there's something primal about the existence of it needing to be alive within us in order to sense that the experience of being human is not, in a way, nihilistic. That the absence of this flame itself is not so traumatizing that for us to deal with and manage the complexity of life itself is so overbearing that it leads us to experience psychological and emotional states of deep detachment, where we are so disconnected from our own humanness that we can justify actions and behaviorisms that, in a sense, lead to behavior where it is so disturbing to the fundamental nature of who we are. So violence as an example, and the justification of violence as an example. I'm thinking about the South Node in Sagittarius at the moment, and that the Pluto in Sagittarius generation, who born from 1995 up until 2008, carry within themselves some really strong memory of prior existences in which religion itself was the vessel to which we could validate killing other human beings as it opposes our own vulnerability and insecurities and our beliefs. And so deeply held within our DNA is this phase of existence that we went through where we used ideology to validate something and to justify it. And that in that process, we can even see that the flame itself is a representation of us causing harm and damage, right? Burning. And that the justification of that process was something very alive and real within us. I'm going to come back to something a little bit more practical, a little bit more grounded in the exploration of the symbolism, and that in some really peculiar way, the flame represents this profound capacity for transformation, in which on one side we have that the flame represents heat. It represents our capacity to cook food, and this kind of meets this primal instinct within us to nurture and need, and to be able to meet these more animalistic needs within us, which is consumption, which is food, which is to eat, and to give us heat, and so that we can protect ourselves from the forces of nature. And yet, if you think about the devastation that took place in Australia in the beginning of this year, and the nature of what fire can do in uncontrollable situations, think about somebody that you know that has been exposed to their apartment, having a flame burst out. Think about any fireman who has engaged in some form of fire outbreak and what it means to actually engage in something like that. And so while simultaneously this being something that's deeply embedded within our ability to create and to manifest and to, as with heat, arise to great heights of human civilization and development, it also can be the very thing that causes an intense amount of destruction. And so the essence of fire itself demands this incredible respect. And one of the things that's really fascinating about the archetype of the fire and the flame is the ability for us to interact with it, in which the lack of maturity can lead to the latter. And so what could seemingly be holding the flames of Vesta, as it were, to heal, can also be the very things that can cause destruction. So as we kind of come onto the chart over here, and hello everybody, why the flame? What is this deep fascination of your monologue around some weird conversation around fire itself? Well, what comes to mind so very profound me in this chart over here is, as you can see, if you look towards, let's see if I can get a laser pointer. Can everybody see the laser pointer? There we go. You got the moon in Aquarius. The laser pointer's stuck. There we go. So we've got a moon in Aquarius over there. The moon opposes the sun in Leo, right? We think of fire. We think of the essence of creation that is rooted in the fire archetype. And then in its polarity to fire, we can see, or the polarity to Leo, we can see that Aquarius stands back from this experience and is detached. And that trauma, dislocation, exists within that frozen part of our emotional landscape, in which the things that have injured us and what we haven't been able to process, as they have been emotionally frozen within us, stuck within us, crystallized within us, right? We have not been able to apply fire to thaw out the jolt in which we experience the sudden shock in our lives. That can be through the death of a parent. It could be through the loss of your favorite toy as a child, for instance. And so when I feel into this energy over here, and I feel into the experience of Saturn leaving Aquarius and re-entering Capricorn, and that since March up until this point in time, we have been in this really, really peculiar space with COVID, and how what seemingly with technology, fire, and we think about the archetype of Prometheus here, we think about the essence of, as Saturn entered Aquarius, we found ourselves in a very peculiar situation in which all of a sudden these new rules started to come out of social distancing, as an example. Aquarius, detachment, right? We're emotionally distant now. We can't feel the flame of hugging another person because there's a sense of the fear of catching, right, a virus that we can't actually see physically with our eyes, in the sense that, oh, there it is, but it is imaginary in a way that, in order for us to really perceive the virus itself, it needs to be used. We need to see it through special instruments, with this a Prometheus thing. It's fire, in order for us to be able to have the capacity to access the depth of which we can study something. Science, Aquarius. We need to have technology to be able to allow ourselves to see the depth of it. So we have the telescope as an example, which is also what was discovered when we used the telescope to find Uranus. So what has this got to do with the full moon in Aquarius? What has this got to do with anything related to astrology? And well, weirdly enough, what I find deeply connected to the symbolism is that Saturn's entering back into Capricorn relative to the experiences that we have had when Saturn has been in Aquarius, and that the moon now enters Aquarius, and it makes this opposition, and the moon squares like Uranus in Taurus, as you can see here. The moon is sitting, the Uranus is sitting here at 10 degrees Taurus, and it connects to the Aquarius part over there. And then you have the sun also squaring Uranus as well. So we've got this T-square in fixed energy. We have this T-square in fixed signs of Earth, Taurus, Scorpio, not Scorpio, but Aquarius, air, and Leo, fire. The relatability here, the connection, is that we have two personal planets, being the moon and the sun, connecting to a transpersonal energy. So to make it more specific, the transpersonal energy or transpersonal planet is, in this case, as I interpret it, Uranus is a collective memory field, so all of us together, memory field of our individual experiences. So in other words, we have 5 people in a room, and everybody has a shared collective experience of something being in the room, but individually within each person, there is a unique perspective to which everybody perceives the nature of the room. One person could be claustrophobic. And so in the room, 5 people can be very sort of damaging to them. Some person that is, let's say, deeply social could find being in a room with 5 people something in which they can just communicate and feel comfortable being social. Right? This planetary energy of Uranus that sits in Taurus has got so many layers, and I wish that I could have the capacity to sit with you for an hour and literally just move through the different perspectives to which I see this Uranus energy. I'm going to try to, in the best way possible, give you what I consider to be what are the most important things that are revealing itself with Uranus and Taurus, and it's that we are all collectively experiencing, in some way, shape, or form, a period of reality in which our survival, our ability to live fire, to keep a flame, to keep our spark of divinity in existence within ourselves, we are deeply, deeply entrenched, whether it be in the way of perceiving life as proactive, and so we're pro. I'm going to stop there because I want to emphasize more of the Uranus thing. So we're all collectively sharing this experience within ourselves at the moment, Uranus and Taurus, in which our most primal survival needs are being threatened. Okay, but when I say threatened, I don't mean it in the sense that there's some boogeyman that is actively doing this. I mean in the sense that we are becoming very, very acutely aware that we live in a world in which each corner is sharing a collective experience in which the fragility of our humanness is very real in front of us. And we all have unique experiences as we interact with it. I'm living in Sweden at the moment, and we all know what Sweden's approach to this whole entire process is about. So from my experience in relation to, say, somebody that's living in Australia, currently in Melbourne as an example, who's in a stage 4 lockdown, right? The experience is different, and yet we share a collective experience in which there is something, there's a virus, and it is present in this existence, but yet in a way, depending on where you are experiencing it, will give you an impression of what it actually is. And we're so divided by this diverse interpretation of the experience that we don't see what's at the core of everything within us singularly. And that is that it is exposing deeply within us this primordial essence of human life and our capacity to connect with what it means to be human, and how we live in a world in which there is no such thing as guaranteed safety. And so this Aquarius moon, in my interpretation, as it squares the Uranus sun sign, is a illumination to a deeper psychological and emotional complex that I think is beginning to manifest itself in a very strong way. And these are the other two things that I wanted to talk about. And that was that Saturn's entrance into Capricorn, Pluto in Capricorn, Jupiter in Capricorn, all sitting at the top there. And while knowing this deep inner security, this lack of it, a sense of trying to give us the illusion of safety as we interact with the world in which it's not possible to actually control the actions of other people. We need to rely on a deeper governing system that enforces itself in order to make decisions for the collective. And that as we interact with Saturn, Jupiter, Pluto, we are divided within the value, Taurus, on what we actually consider to be the right approach to protecting ourselves. Capricorn, protection. How do we father? All right, how do we protect? How do we create a boundary around ourselves in order for us to feel safe regarding life that is very present and real with us at the moment? Because the nature of this quote-unquote virus, as an example, is it is not it's not an organism that is seeking to go to the nearest shop to purchase its daily groceries and then to come home and then to contemplate the nature of its existence through the meaning of life in an existential way. It's not. It is not from that. It's not human in that sense. And so it confuses us. It confuses our psychology. It confuses our capacity to make sense of it, because it brings us to something really primal within us. And that is that, again, as I talk about it, is, are we really safe? Do you really feel safe? And some people will say, yeah, sure, absolutely, I feel that way. Some people might not. But if you wanted to be really raw with this process, you would recognize that within inside of yourself, and this is the thing I wanted to come to with the Capricorn stuff, is that one of the side effects of a civilization that is at its senescence stage, which is to say that we are at a point in which the emotional identity to which we align with a group of values and philosophies and truths and laws that will give us a container in order for us to feel safe within so we can get upon our daily lives, is aged, and it no longer supports or sustains life. And so as the flame dies, and is actually dead, in my opinion, as the flame is dead relative to this old paradigm, we are faced with this transition phase between what it means to live post flame gone or flame exhausted world, in which the essence and spirit of that world is no longer, and this territory that is deeply unknown, to which what do the new laws look like? What does the new civilization look like? Do we even have the capacity to envision it in a way that is beneficial, supportive? For me personally, I don't think so. I think that part of this moon in Aquarius energy is revealing to us a very deep secret about the collective experience in which we are, while seemingly very emotionally codependent on the need for governing structures to be in place so that we don't have to take responsibility for our lives. We're also very aware that that codependency itself is not healthy. And so we're caught between this place of, in a sense, aligning with an ideology or a truth that reinforces ideals of what a civilization needs to look like or a society needs to look like, and that the underlying code of that ideology is rooted in a protection mechanism for something that feels or shows us our vulnerability. So if we create a world in which X, Y, Z is like this, then everybody will be happy. And so there's conformity to that process. And one of the things that's deeply interesting about the nature of the flame itself is that we as human beings, and this is the kind of paradox here, is that we as human beings, mostly us that are listening to this video now, have come to an age within our lives in which this terrain that we are traversing right now is not really familiar. And we are not equipped to understand the complexity of what it is that life is actually presenting to us as the next phase of our evolution. And so innovation, Prometheus, and the spark of creativity is, while simultaneously dead in one civilization and dead in one context of life, the spark for something new is so intensely craved that and I encourage you to go and read up about the divine child archetype from Jungian psychology, or the archetype itself, and the essence of why is it that when we interact with a child, we immediately feel our defenses put down. Because why is that the case? And so when we interact with something so innocent and so childlike, it represents a spark of something potential, the spark of what is for the future, the spark for what could be. It's freshness. It can be conditioned by something without any challenges. And so simultaneously, with the sun sitting in Leo at the moment, squaring the Uranus in Taurus, and you have and Mars transiting through Aries at this point in time, and it's going to go in its shadow form at the moment, or shadow period, and then it's going to retrograde, and then it's going to go back over. So it's going to stay in Aries for quite some time, up until November, if I'm not sure. It seems to me that that square that Mars is having between Jupiter, Pluto, and Saturn is causing the stress for us to all find within ourselves the capacity to adjust and shift to a new reality. And the essence of the shift is that we are in deep, whether conscious or unconscious, recognition that something has died, and that something new in some way within ourselves wants to be reborn. And there are people who are feeling absent within themselves in the spark. What is the meaning of life? Because everything that is in me seems to not meet the external. And so the flame that exists within us, this sun in Leo, ignites for us the potential to explore inwardly what the next phase of our emotional and psychological identity is. Like, who are we? Who are you? Would be the question. And so Jupiter enters Capricorn I did a video a while back last year, and I said I used the imagery very specifically. I used the imagery of bridges, and I used the imagery of the door. And I highly encourage you to go watch that video again, by the way, Jupiter in Capricorn, because what I sensed was that we would all be entering a period of time in which it would be akin or similar to the experience of Luke Skywalker, for those of you that are knowledgeable within the Star Wars film or the iconic experience, entering the Dogon Cave. And this cave is a metaphor to which when we enter the darkness of something, so we are entering the darkness, so we are walking into the nature of our own being, so we enter our own shadow, the collective shadow, that what we face there is ultimately the barrier within us. So everything that we experience psychologically and emotionally within ourselves, we can discover within ourselves when we enter this cave and we bring with us what we think is there. And so as we experience this new territory of collective shifting of energy, there is a sort of polarity that's occurring in which one side of us is moving in this direction and one side of us is moving in that direction. And yet, ironically, both of those sides are just a mechanism of protection relative to the core realization that we are, and I know this is going to sound incredibly intense, but we are deeply, deeply, deeply fragile. As much as we have technology in a Promethean type of way that gives us this capacity to intellectualize reality and create nanoparticles and build large hadron colliders as an example, there is almost a sense of being able to feel that in order to control nature, we dominate it. So we believe or project into the outside world a protection mechanism that reinforces to us that we have control over something that really at a primal state, we know that at any point in time, something catastrophic could take place and we could lose everything. And so our response to things like COVID, for instance, or viruses, or anything for that matter, a barraging flame of uncontrollable destruction that happens in Australia as an example, can bring us to the edge. And this is Uranus and Taurus. And so the question that gets invited here with Saturn re-entering Capricorn is, what's really real for you? What actually is really real for you in this moment, in this arena? What is the thing that really matters? What is the value of your life? How can you tend to that value in a more transcendental way? And it's a really peculiar thing, because there's a part of that message over there that sounds like we should avoid things and make judgments on anything that doesn't represent transcendental value. And ironically, that's the paradox of the situation, is that this beautiful story between Prometheus and Zeus, and I speak about this in a way in which the Aquarius archetype and the Leo archetype and the Taurus archetype and the Scorpio archetype, which, by the way, if you come over here and you see that there's nothing in Scorpio, and yet, like I've said before, the planetary nodes of Neptune sit at 11 degrees Aquarius. The moon is literally conjunct. The full moon is literally conjunct the planetary nodes of Neptune. And those planetary nodes of Neptune are squared by Uranus at the moment. Now, in 1978, 1977, 1976, if I'm not mistaken, Uranus was in Scorpio, which was also at the same time it was in the opposition. So it was sitting there, it was squaring the planetary nodes of Uranus, of Neptune at the time. Now, I did a video a long time ago where I talked about when the planetary nodes of Neptune get activated. You remember, Venus was actually conjunct Uranus at the time, that we went into this intense global realization that COVID was here and that this deadly virus was going to kill us, and we were really aware of the fact that, life and death was right in front of us like this. every time the planetary nodes on Neptune are aspected, we have things like a tsunami that exists in 2004. We have different forms of experiences that, in a sense, dissolve our self-importance, or our mechanisms that we project into the world that give us a sense of self-importance in order for us to deal with the weight of the intensity of what reality is, which is far more complex, far more chaotic, far more uncertain, and far more unpredictable than what we could even comprehend. And that as much as we could even sit here, even in myself, sit here and try and comprehend an aspect of reality in its most entirety, it's not possible. We're not intellectually that smart. We can appear to be that case. And there are definitely people who have got the capacity to understand reality in a way that can make us feel a little bit more silly about things. But to really, really feel as a human being that we have total control over something so incredibly vast is a really difficult thing to accept. And so we'll create and manifest and mature ideals and values and beliefs that give us this importance, because the weight of dealing with reality at such an intense level is too much. So the transiting node of Uranus, hitting the south node of Neptune and the north node of Neptune speaks to this collective awareness that, in a sense, we have all been exposed to some form of lack of safety, some form of traumatic experience that is frozen within us, and that when we experience something in our future that threatens that security, it doesn't matter how much spiritual truth and wisdom you have, your primal instinct kicks in, and the deepest essence of yourself actually becomes more real, and it reveals to us who we are as a species. Awareness itself and the nature of our species are very different things, in the sense that the synthesis between the two is something that we try to achieve in this process. But awareness itself doesn't purely feed you. It doesn't sustain the genetic code that is required, the instructions for your liver, for instance, to maintain itself if you're not feeding it with substance. So, to come back to something more practical and less spacey in my sharing over here, the Pluto, Jupiter, and Saturn conjunction, all in the 10th house there in Capricorn, speaks to the part of us where we have felt, and this is what Jupiter entering Capricorn is about, and entering the cave, the Dogon cave, was that we are collectively in awareness of where that protection and that safety has not been able to be fully there, and the abandonment associated with it, abandonment and the trust trauma that's manifested itself, where we haven't felt safe as a child. We haven't had positive mirroring that encouraged us to feel like it was safe. And so we are, in a sense, we are still grieving the loss of safety. We are grieving the loss of our own authenticity being sacrificed, as Dr. Gabo Mateo talks about in his book Hungry Ghosts, when he shares about the experience of societal structure that is like rooted, its flame, its essence is rooted on technological and advancement in a way that leaves us disconnected in our heart. And so even though we have all of these amazing things that can, mobile telephones that can give us connection and allow us to do this type of thing here, and for you to sit and interact with that, as amazing as that is, there's still an essence of feeling connected in a human way that's lost. And that's part of the flame here, is that as much as we are enhancing ourselves, as much as that we are moving forward in a progressive way, there's still a part of us that needs to be acknowledged, and that's that deep primal essence. And it's manifesting itself in very, very disturbing ways, as an example. So Pluto, Jupiter, and Capricorn is bringing us to a lot of things that we need to look at before we can move into this Aquarius energy. That's when Saturn will take us there and Pluto will take us there. And as confrontational as it sounds or silly as it sounds, my prediction is that there are two types of experiences that are going to manifest when Saturn hits in Aquarius and Pluto hits in Aquarius. People who have been able to, and have been fortunate enough to be able to heal themselves from the dislocation of the prior cycle of societal structure, in which the flame of civilization and industrial revolution brought us something as incredible as this, but the emotional wounding that has been a byproduct of that has led us to things like political correctness culture, as an example, and the importance of it, and lack of empathy and family dysfunction and trauma, basically, in which people's boundaries and sense of guidance and the lack of authority and maturity in a very profound way is completely absent. We don't feel safe. We don't feel safe. And that is one of the reasons as to why we look to governmental structures in order for them to show control, because if they don't show control, in a way, it reinforces to us that there's nobody that's coming to rescue you. And so the moment that you recognize that and you see the governmental structure as the thing that's keeping you codependent in that process, that will help you through Saturn entering Aquarius, that will help you through Pluto entering Aquarius, because there's going to be traumatized people, because the emotional intensity of 2020 and 2021, 2022 is not going to decrease, because it's not here for us. It's not, oh, look, human beings are, wow, 2020 was intense. Let's not do anything for 2021. It's not even remotely close to it. It is transformation. The fire is illuminating in one area, and what is burning away needs to be burnt away. What are you burning away? What is not nourishing you? What is not feeding you? What is not cooking for you in that sense? You know, the flame is here to broaden it. And what needs to be burned away? What needs to be let go of? Okay. Thank you very much, everybody, for sitting and listening to me talk about this. And I hope that in some way, shape, or form, it brought you something. My main intention is to not actually talk about astrology in a way that's, I don't know, can't do it. So this is what it's real for me. This is how I see it, and I hope that you appreciate it. I just want to let everybody know, of course, that on our website we've got loads of content that we create on purpose to give you something meaningful to work with. And the most recent creation that was done was the Saturn Tools Workshop. And that was something that was manifested from my own life experience, and I felt deeply inspired to share it. And so if that's something that you feel you're ready to have space in your life right now to work with, it's something that I encourage you to do, and it speaks deeply to the deficiency of our capacity to have been supported and guided in a way in which you can be your own authority. So as an example, what type of parent do you have in your head? What is the superego? And what type of a family trauma have you had? What type of abandonment do you struggle with? You know, who's your mentor? These types of things. This is what's encoded in this this workshop. So I encourage you to go to check that out if you feel inspired to resonate with my work, and if you feel that you're ready to embark on an emotional transformation experience. All right, people. Thanks very much for listening. Have a wonderful day. Take care. Bye-bye.